Hey guys, here we go into Errol Spence versus Kell Brook, rounds 3 and 4, and I am going to be talking about it as a fight, but I'm also going to be talking a little bit about it in terms of him fighting Peterson, Lamont Peterson. I just did the video for Lamont Peterson versus Diaz, and talked about some of the things that Peterson can do to kind of mitigate Errol Spence's offense. And when I see instances like that, I'm going to point them out and talk about them and talk about how they affect like boxing theory. So this might not be, the complete breakdown of Kell Brook Errol Spence that you guys are hoping, but it might be interesting for this Saturday's fight if you're an Errol Spence fan. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's cut that shit out. So in the first two rounds, you kind of saw that Errol Spence was making some adjustments by ducking when he would come in with his jab. Now this is interesting. So right away, as soon as and this is important from the film study from Peterson, Diaz. This is one of the problems that I have with Errol Spence is his defense. Right, Kell Brook starts throwing shots at him, and he does a decent job of getting off the line. Right, the punches come, he ducks down, and he moves off the line a little bit. But he goes straight to his high guard, right? He goes straight to his high guard, and I think that might leave him some body shots open for Lamont Peterson. And we'll see if there's any more of that kind of stuff. Let's see. So, Kell Brook being a little fancy right here with his active guard, and that's something you always want to see, right? He's able to stop Errol Spence from setting up his punches by doing that, right? So let's kind of slow it down, man. These guys are so fucking fast. So able to normally, right? Errol Spence will throw two punches, right? He'll do two jabs and then slip in with his left hand, right? But beautiful right there. So he goes to shoot that shot, boom. And what does Kell Brook do? He controls that lead hand and pushes it off with his own right hand. It does look like it tags him a little bit, right? But because he controls that lead hand, right, with his own lead hand, it stops Errol Spence from being able to even transfer his weight to throw that left hand, even though he has lead foot dominance. Even though he does sneak lead foot dominance in there, Kell Brook does a good job of moving off the line after and stopping Errol Spence from setting up his punches, right? Now, it's interesting because I don't think that that's going to be an effective strategy for Peterson. Peterson... Man, he just doesn't control the lead hand as much as he should. I talk about it in that video that he's very inconsistent with those ideas and with those boxing techniques, and because of those inconsistencies, I think that it's not going to be an effective strategy for him. Although if he does do it, it will be very, very effective if he's able to, fight Errol Spence for lead hand dominance, because of the fact that Errol Spence doesn't look for lead hand dominance, right? He only looks to shoot those two feints, take lead foot dominance, and then throw some punches, right? But this is something that's also, again, really interesting for the Lamont Peterson fight, right? Errol Spence stays in the high guard, right? And Errol Spence, he doesn't move off the line here. He's not really blocking those shots, as you see one of them just goes straight through the guard, right? On the glove, and then straight through the guard, just barely missing, right? And that's one of the problems that I have with Errol Spence's defense is that he doesn't have any head movement, right? And if you watch him hit mitts with his coach, he just stands straight up and down on the line, throwing punches. His coach, here's one punch, here's one punch, here's one punch, right? And that's the reason why he's so stagnant in his guard, and it might be so easy for him to be hit. Especially by Peterson, who has a little bit more of an active guard than I think Kell Brook does. But in that video, I also talk about how the body is going to be open when you shoot some probes and some feints, right, at Errol Spence, because he goes immediately to his high guard. Now look at how wide that body is, right? Super open, and I think that that's going to be a huge source of offense for Lamont Peterson when fighting Errol Spence. As long as he also does it and he moves off the line after. Now, shooting that jab, taking lead foot dominance. And I'm not sure he lands the left hand right there. But man, look at how much he fights on the inside. Just punch after punch after punch, right? Now, you don't like to see him get off balance, but that's not the point. But the interesting part about that is Errol Spence or Lamont Peterson, he doesn't always move off the line. You know, he kind of shells up similarly to the way that Errol Spence does, right? So they both kind of have this, you know, shell up kind of defense where they just wait for their opponent to throw punches, right? And then counter, right? Even though Errol Spence didn't counter Kell Brook in that instance, probably because Kell Brook was just too far away. But they both do that, right? So it leads me to believe whoever is going first or whoever is controlling the space between them is going to have the major upper hand in the fight. You know, I still give Errol Spence the speed and the power advantage and the ability to close the fight out late in the fight. I give him that advantage. Also, you know, the anomaly of maybe getting him with that Matisse body shot knockout. I think it was Matisse. I should have looked that up in between rounds just so I don't sound like a complete retard. But I think that it was Matisse that knocked him out with the body shot. And barring that, I still give Errol Spence the nod in terms of speed and power and such. Errol Spence or Peterson is going to have to be very crafty in this fight and be constantly moving off the line if he's going to look to be beating Errol Spence. Now, man, that was interesting right there. Boom, goes to the body. That is a beautiful shot, you guys. Kell Brook goes to the body, and then Errol Spence counters with the straight left hand or the left hook to the head. Beautiful shot. Now, this is something, number one, so we'll talk about what Kell Brook doesn't do well here, right? He explodes out of his guard, right? He doesn't set the punch up, and he's not really able to get Errol Spence out of position, right? And that allows Errol Spence to perfectly counter him with that shot. And just like we talked about in the training video, right? When you see Errol Spence just one punch, one punch, one punch, and he's just got a perfect rhythm for this one punch right here, right? Block the body shot, one punch, and just cracks him with that shot, and then moves off the line. You know, Kell Brook does a decent job of moving off the line too, but Kell Brook, after shooting that shot, doesn't control Errol Spence. He doesn't bring his left arm or his right arm back up, right? He doesn't push off on him, and he doesn't turn and move off the line himself, so he winds up getting cracked with that shot. Now, this is really interesting because Peterson does very similar stuff, right? In the fight prep, we see him do some feinting and some probing, right? Like some tap, tap, tap punches. But Peterson stays on the line as well. You know, he's not very active at moving off the line. And if Errol Spence can throw some counters like that, which I think I kind of glossed over the first few times I watched this fight, if he can land some counters like that, he's going to be able to take away a lot of the effectiveness of Peterson's punches as well, because Peterson never moves off the line. You know, he does sometimes, you know, but again, it's very inconsistent, and I'm not sure why. Again, you know, Errol Spence coming in with the same offense, right? Shooting that lead hand, taking lead foot dominance, and then looking to kind of sneak his left hand in there. Kell Brook, you know, not really shooting that like as a punch. It looks like he kind of just resigns it to kind of controlling Errol Spence's head, right? As you notice that it kind of comes just over the top. It's not a hook, right? And this is something that was really interesting that I saw when I watched it the first few times, is that Kell Brook, at some point in the fight, he completely stops throwing it as a counter and only throws it to control Errol Spence's head. Which, you know, might be smart with Errol Spence kind of ducking, right? Because he shoots that shot and then ducks his head. Fuck, I missed the frame, but I'm not going to go back, whatever. But anyway, moving on. Oh, there you go. He throws a real shot right there. Pulls back, throws the counter. Errol Spence is able to slide under it, right? Boom, and then throw a body shot. good for Errol Spence. Great job for Errol Spence. He follows up very well on that shot too. But Kell Brook kind of getting stuck in that pattern. He had a game plan. It was a great game plan, but you got to make adjustments, right? And Errol Spence has adjusted to this countering that Kell Brook is looking to use, and now he's sliding under the shot. And that takes away all of the effectiveness of the counter. Now, again, same thing, right? Does he shoot this one as a punch? Not really. And then gets on top of his head and stops him from throwing punches. Not really super effective at that either. Errol Spence definitely landing some good shots on the inside. Now, this is some interesting stuff too, because as we saw in the last video, the Peterson one, Diaz was landing some great shots on the inside, some really short shots, and I wasn't sure at first if Errol Spence would be able to land similar punches as well, right? I'm not sure, but it looks like from this video that he is going to be able to do that, and I think that that's going to take away a lot of the effectiveness of Peterson's inside fighting. And Peterson, to be honest, is an inside fighter. Boom. Great shot from Kell Brook right there after he kind of gets raked over the coals with this jab. So now it's interesting, like the turn of the fight, right? So we know that he's looking to counter the jab with the hook, right? But his confidence in that, because Errol Spence has been ducking, right, and bringing his head low, has kind of waned, and now he's just eating jabs. He's not making his own adjustment. And now he makes his first adjustment to kind of start throwing a counter right hand instead, right? And again, Errol Spence, for the most part, his head is always there, right? And I think that that's going to be a huge problem for him against Peterson, right? I think Peterson is going to be able to take advantage of that too and make the fight much tougher on Errol Spence than he probably wants it to be. But again, oh man, great job right there from Errol Spence. Boom. He's able to cut the ring off really quickly on him and catch him with the shot. And again, we know Errol Spence fights really well when he gets opponent against the ropes. I kind of like this, watching it in slow-mo rather than real time, because then I can just kind of go through and watch stuff. And I don't have to worry about pausing it every 5 seconds so that it doesn't get taken down for copyright bullshit. But good slipping from Kell Brook. And again, right, active guard, right? So Kell Brook ducks to his right, then goes and ducks to his left. And Errol Spence doesn't even see Kell Brook change head slots and shoots a jab to where he thought Kell Brook's head was going to be, right? Again, having an active guard. And this is something that Peterson shows in his fight it's very important. But for some reason, later on in the fight, midway through the round, Peterson just completely abandons having an active guard, coming in, rolling, slipping, moving around, and that's gonna make Errol Spence's offense so much more effective, because Errol Spence is fast. If you're not already in motion, if you're not already making your opponent guess where your head's going to be, Errol Spence has a fantastic offense to take advantage of that. So if you're not controlling the space between them and you don't have an active guard, you're not moving your head already, Errol Spence is going to have a very easy time finding your head, because he's so sharp and he's so fast. Again, great inside fighting from Errol Spence. Not a lot of power on that shot, right? But being able to make you worry about that kind of stuff is very important too. I wonder if Errol Spence is maybe like, oh man. Great shots right there. So obviously Kell Brook, comes in with the right hand and then looks to close the distance, right? And then control Errol Spence, right? But Errol Spence is very easily able to find some openings. And this is going to be some stuff right here that's going to be very this might be half of the Peterson fight, you guys. This might be exactly how the Peterson fight winds up. Because Peterson likes to pressure. He likes to come forward. And Errol Spence, again, right? He doesn't move his head, right? He gets his guard up right there and blocks that shot. But Peterson likes to smother his opponents right after he lands shots too, right? But as you can see here, boom, Errol Spence is very easily able to find some openings and stop his opponent from smothering him, you know? Now, this might be a huge tell for how the Peterson fight goes because, like I just said, Peterson fights a very similar way, and Errol Spence is very good at finding those little holes on the inside. Not bad right there. Finally, turning him out and moving off the line and controlling him and not even letting him get a left hand off. Again, no head movement, right? But he's able to block that shot, right? But look at how he blocks it with both hands, right? Not a big fan of that. And that makes me believe, like, now that's also really interesting too, because Peterson likes to throw a lead right hand, but he throws it only to get you to bring your guard up, and then he pounds the body with the left hand, right? That, you know, that makes me think that, you know, Errol Spence is going to have to make some adjustments in his defense, and it's going to be really interesting to see where Errol Spence goes with his defense, and how he makes those adjustments when fighting Peterson. Now, I don't think Peterson's a counterpuncher at all, so a lot of that stuff is not going to be very important. Like this kind of stuff right here. I think Peterson is going to shell up and allow Errol Spence to kind of tee off on him, right? I think Errol Spence is going to I think Lamont Peterson is going to come back, right, after that left hand comes, and I think Lamont Peterson is going to throw a couple shots of his own, right? But that's just going to make it even more fun and an exciting fight. But I don't think that unless Peterson looks to control Errol Spence's lead hand, I don't think he's going to be able to stop Errol Spence's offense, right? Which is very bad for him. As limited as Errol Spence's offense is, right? We talk about it, lead left hand or lead right hand, take lead foot dominance, throw that left hand, let it go. As limited as it is, I think it's going to still be very effective against Lamont Peterson. Oh man, this is beautiful. So shooting that body shot, ooh, Jesus, look at that, super dangerous. Shoots that body shot, and I don't think it's a real punch. I think he's just trying to work his way in, and then Errol Spence controls his shoulder, and then Kell Brook controls his shoulder, right? So neither one of them wind up getting their next punch off, but really great stuff. And then Kell Brook does catch him on the ropes right there. Does a good job of tying him up. I wonder if, you know, Errol Spence is looking to take a break in the round, because he was really putting it on Kell Brook earlier in the round. But now he's kind of letting Kell Brook come forward. Kell Brook goes to the body with another lead right hand. And again, right, Errol Spence's head is always in the same spot, right? And at the last second, he realizes it's a body shot, but he's not able to get in the way of it because his natural defense is the high guard, right? And that's going to be a little bit of a problem, like I said, against Peterson, because Peterson does like to go to the body, especially with that left hook. All right. And again, notice that neither one of them are really controlling the space between them, right? A lot of exploding out of their guards. Boom. Not bad from Kell Brook there. Able to get under that shot and land a little right hook upstairs. But notice how this exchange starts out, right? Leaping right hook, right? But there's almost no chance for that punch to land because it wasn't set up at all. Kell Brook's easily able to get out of the way of it. And kind of, you know, not really make Errol Spence pay for it. But again, that's one of the problems with just kind of exploding out of your guard. And again, Kell Brook just comes in, shoots his right hand because Errol Spence's head is always in the same spot. He's able to land that shot right there. tapping him to the body, trying to set up a shot, but his left arm is kind of tied up right there. Now, look at how easy this is for Kell Brook, right? I talk about this a little bit in the Peterson Diaz fight. Diaz shows him some good feints, some good probes, right? And is able to control him. But look at how this simple move, right? Kell Brook slips to the inside, and immediately Errol Spence goes to his high guard, right? He leaves a little space so you can see through his gloves, right? But he brings up his high guard. And now he's out of position, right? Kell Brook doesn't throw the right punches, right? He gets him to whoop, and then he throws the uppercut, tries to split the guard so he can get the right hand in there. But look at how easy it is to control the space between you and your opponent simply by giving him a little feint, right? Now, that's something that both Peterson and Errol Spence are going to need to do during the course of the fight. To be honest, I don't think Errol Spence is going to have to do it. I think he's going to have the advantages if neither one of them are doing it, just like he did in this fight. But I think that if Lamont Peterson is to have any success in the fight with Errol Spence, he's going to have to use very similar techniques like this, right? Just use simple feints to keep Errol Spence in his high guard, to keep his gloves at home, and to stop him from just unloading punches whenever he wants to, right? Now, it would have been much better for Brook if he did that and he threw a left hook to the body, right? Because that body is open right there. And I do think that that's something that Peterson is going to do as well. Shoot the body shots instead of shooting the punches to the head. But I think that, to be honest, I think that Kell Brook was looking to knock Errol Spence out. And because of the fact that Errol Spence doesn't ever move his head, Kell Brook thought that he was just going to be able to land those headshots anytime he wanted. And I think that kind of maybe limited his offense as well to just headshots. Again, right, the body shot. And then Errol Spence brings his gloves up to the high guard, right, and then eats a body shot. Again, not the greatest defense, right? Another thing to note, he doesn't move off the line, right? When the punch comes, he just stays on the line. And that's going to be something he needs to work on for sure. Not just standing there and eating punches from your opponent. Although he's going to be able to get away with it against Peterson, because Peterson's not the greatest puncher, right? It is going to be something he needs to work on when he fights somebody like Crawford, who I think is going to beat him. Oh man, great boxing right here. This is such an interesting little oh man. What an interesting little scenario. So, remember I was just talking about using feints and using probes to control the space between you and your opponent? So here we have both of them looking to do that, right? Errol Spence flashing his lead hand. So let's just watch Errol Spence real quick, right? Flashing his lead hand. That one looked reactive, right? Now he's looking to feint with his jab right there. Feinting again, shuffling his hands a little bit, feinting, and then boom, winds up walking into a straight right hand, right? And that, again, that's just a product of him not having any head movement, right? We have seen him shoot the lead hand and then duck a shot, right, when he does it, but because he doesn't have any inherent head movement, his head is always in basically the same spot, Kell Brook is able to make an adjustment and move away from the left hook counter to the straight right hand counter, which is going to be way more effective, especially if Errol Spence is just ducking. But let's go ahead and go back and watch Kell Brook's motions now, right? As he looks to control the space between them, right? And how each of them wind up getting frozen. And now I think that Errol Spence was the one that was being dictated to. I think it was actually Kell Brook, the one that had control of the space between them, right? And now we're going to talk about the effectiveness of this after, right? But Kell Brook ducking down to his right, ducking down to his left, slipping to the left, ducking down to his right, pulling back, right? Look at all the head movement that he's got going on. Boom. And on that rhythm, right, because he's the one moving, right, Errol Spence looks to time him, right? So he moves to the left, moves to the right, moves to the left, right? And then Errol Spence looks to time him moving back to the right, right? And catch him in between those motions, showing that Kell Brook was actually the one dictating to Errol Spence when they were going to punch, right? And Kell Brook picks up very well on the timing. But not only that, one thing that Errol Spence probably isn't thinking about is when you're using your head movement and you're slipping, to the left, to the inside, to the outside, you're not really committed to these movements, right? You're not transferring your weight. You're just using your upper body kind of to move those motions so that you can still transfer your weight and throw any kind of punch that you want, no matter where your head is, because you're not committed to it, right? When you commit to a motion, you transfer your weight from neutral-ish, right, to one leg or the other. And Kell Brook, because he's not doing that, he's just using his active guard, right, slipping, keeping Errol Spence guessing, he's able to dictate to Errol Spence when they're actually going to fight and able to deliver a great counter right here. But beautiful boxing from Kell Brook right there. Great adjustment. And again, Errol Spence, high guard, right, kind of ducks down and tries to get away from that shot, right, because he thinks it's going to be a right hand to the head again. He doesn't do the high guard right there, but he eats another body shot, right? He does fight well on the inside right there. Look at that. This is going to be something that Peterson has a huge problem dealing with, right? So if he's looking to smother him, right, look at how easily Errol Spence is able to create space simply by taking a step back and going to the body and then taking another shot to the head. That's going to be something that's going to be very difficult for Peterson to overcome, I think, especially because Peterson is always walking forward. And again, the jab isn't working for Errol Spence, so he kind of abandons it and goes straight with the straight left hand, but Kell Brook is easily able to parry that shot and take that ability away because, like I've talked about before, and I don't want to harp on it, right? Errol Spence is a very good fighter, but his offense is very limited. He doesn't understand all of the different ways that he's able to get his opponent out of position by feinting and probing and setting his punches up because of the amateur system, very likely, because you don't do a lot of that in the amateurs. But anyway, he just comes in with that straight right hand or the straight left hand, and then kind of taps him with the right hook, right? Not a real shot, but not really able to land any punches until they get onto the inside, where Kell Brook is really looking to smother him, right? Smother him and control him and clinch, right? And I don't think his clinch game was on point in this fight. Some of that definitely had to do with Errol Spence being able to create space, but also I think a lot of it had stemmed from the backlash he got from fighting Sean Porter, right? And I think that kind of stopped him from wanting to use it as much, wanting to prove to himself that he doesn't have to clinch to win a world title, Bad idea, Brook. You should have held that motherfucker like he was your dying child. Don't let him go. Ooh, so let's look at this. Interesting. So Kell Brook, again, noticing as soon as Kell Brook goes to shoot a shot, right, Errol Spence immediately goes to the high guard. So Kell Brook is able to easily go to the body, right? Errol Spence does a decent job of moving back, right? So we'll watch Errol Spence, right? When that body shot comes, right, he takes a slight step back, right? And then goes to counter with his straight left hand, right? It doesn't get there, right? But as Kell Brook is transferring his weight, so he shoots that shot, and then he starts transferring his weight to throw that uppercut. But that's really interesting that Errol Spence is so good at that, taking a slight step back when his opponent punches to create a little bit of space, take a little of the steam off the shot, and then make his own counter. That's something that I actually haven't ever noticed him doing before. Although I think he did it in the last round, but I didn't notice that he was taking a step back with it. Very crafty. It actually reminds me of an interview that I heard. So I watch when I'm at work and I'm like walking around and stuff. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I listen to the Joe Rogan Experience. I listen to The Fighter and the Kid. And there's this guy, Brian Callen. He actually trains at the gym that Chris Van Heerden trains at, right? And he was talking to Chris Van Heerden about Errol Spence, and he was like, "Oh, so you're a really good fighter. You know, what was it that Errol Spence does that made it so hard for you to fight him?" And Chris Van Heerden told Brian Callen that, "Oh, you know, he's just really good at taking that small step back, you know, and creating just enough space for you to miss and for him to counter." And it's interesting because I think I heard this last week, and I've never noticed it in his fights before. I've never seen it. You know, I didn't do a lot of film study on the Chris Van Heerden fight, and obviously he didn't use those tactics, I don't think, at against Chris Algieri. And this is the first time I've done a real film study against him and Brook. But it's really interesting to hear that and to kind of see it in action here. You know, because it was very interesting to hear that and not having seen it before. Boom. Some good reflexive boxing right there. Not a lot going on there. Again, Errol Spence ducking the counter, getting kinda, you know, smothered a little bit. Ooh, did Errol Spence actually slip that one? So the right hand comes. Yeah, it looks like he kind of slips it a little bit. Not bad. But, you know, again, his head basically still in the same spot. I think he barely slips it, right? Oh, and then comes in with the body shot again. Does he take a step back with this one too? No, he doesn't. But he just does throw the counter body shot. And again, that's something that Peterson's really going to have to worry about. Not bad right there. So coming in, anticipating the counter, ducking. You know, you're not supposed to bring your head all the way down like that. Not only is it dangerous, right, but if your opponent throws a punch at the top of your head, they might break their hand. So you're not supposed to do that. But obviously that's not his intention. He's just trying to duck the counter. But then able to shuffle forward. And Brook makes the mistake of staying on the line with him, right? And then it allows Errol Spence to kind of just, you know, tee off on him right here and kind of throw some punches. Create a little space right there. Not bad again. Following him. And now this is the product right here of Kell Brook not controlling the space between them. Right? I talk about that. Remember how he would use his head movement, right? Just a little bit. And they had that like 5-second like just standstill in front of each other before Errol Spence threw a punch. You need to be feinting. You need to be probing. You need to be doing something. You know, and I think that Kell Brook kind of got away from a lot of those strategies because he was so in tune with just trying to counter the jab that he didn't ever think to stop him from throwing the jab at all, right? But because he's not controlling the space, Errol Spence is easily able to walk him up to the ropes, right? And now, again, this might be the story of the Peterson fight too, because we don't know if Peterson is going to use lead hand dominance, if he's going to control Errol Spence's jab. Even though he's shown those skills, we don't know if he's going to do that, so it might wind up being that Errol Spence is able to just bully Peterson into the ropes, and vice versa, because we do know that Errol Spence doesn't know how to use lead hand dominance, that Errol Spence doesn't know how to control his opponent's jab. That is something that we do know about him. Oh, man. Look at that big shot right there. Boom. So Errol Spence, or it looks like Kell Brook, is slipping in, trying to make it look like it's going to be a right hand, and then comes in with the left hook. You know, I'm not sure if he thought that Errol Spence was going to counter first, right? But he's able to walk him into that straight left hand right there. You know, kind of a poor setup from Kell Brook. I'm not sure exactly what he was looking to expect from Errol Spence. But man, the inside fighting, I definitely think that it's going to be a fun and entertaining fight between Peterson and Errol Spence. I like that from Kell Brook right there. So he comes in, slips to the outside of Errol Spence, and then shoots the right hand. I really like that. I think it's crafty. It doesn't work right there. He's used it probably a few too many times. And then it's kind of tied up, you know. Not really a lot going on here. Now, Errol Spence looking to really not allow Kell Brook to capitalize on the body shots, right? So again, going to the body, right? And I can't tell what Errol Spence is doing. It looks like he might be parrying it, right? I think he's kind of figured out that Kell Brook is looking to only go to the body, and he's able to parry it and then throw his straight left hand, which Kell Brook does duck, but then he kind of walks into this other one right here as they come up. Boom. I'm not sure that lands. Let's watch it one more time. My bad, guys. It does look like it lands, yeah. But again, Kell Brook not controlling the space and is walking into shots, you know, getting walked into punches, right? And it's interesting because when you have a talent like Errol Spence, right, you really have to... Any other C-level fighter, you know, a fighter that doesn't understand how to control, doesn't know how to control like the lead hands, doesn't know how to use feints and probes, doesn't know how to, you know, do all that kind of stuff. Errol Spence is just going to be able to walk them down, you know, walk them down, you know, throw punches whenever they want, and because he's so fast and he's so strong, he's going to wind up having the advantage in those situations. You know, but as soon as he fights somebody who really knows how to control the space, control the distance between them, use the feints, use the probes, Errol Spence is going to have a lot of problems. Sorry, I wasn't watching the last 5 seconds or whatever. Not a lot going on. A lot of, you know, again, not really controlling the distance right here. He's able to counter, land a right hand, but not a lot of power on it right there. Errol Spence looks like he's making an adjustment now. Let's see how he handles this right hand. Tries to parry it, and then ducks the possible second shot, and then goes to the body. Taking away the effectiveness now of Kell Brook's right hand with a decent adjustment. And again, Kell Brook going to the body, boom, and then finding it very difficult to have any effectiveness in his offense because of the fact that Errol Spence always follows up, right? And I talked about this in the breakdown for this fight too, that was going to be a key to the fight for Errol Spence, was making sure that he makes his opponents make Kell Brook pay for his punches, and that amateur style where you're always countering back. And I didn't really notice how effective Errol Spence was at doing this because of the fact that Kell Brook was being the first one to go, right? He was the first, so you're like, oh, he got him with a shot, you know, and then you really kind of don't really see how effective Errol Spence is being with his counters, right? Because he's still getting hit. But Errol Spence doing a very good job of making Kell Brook pay for his offense, right? As Kell Brook stays on the line, as Kell Brook doesn't turn or control Errol Spence. And that's going to be really interesting to see how Lamont Peterson deals with the same style. All right, let's break that down. That's interesting. So shoots that right hand, shoots a double right hand, catches him with it, and then Errol Spence misses with his lead left hand. Really interesting to shoot a double right hand, though. I think you do see him do that in the build up to this fight against JoJo. Is that who I did it on? JoJo Stevens? I'm not sure. But some really interesting stuff in this fight, you guys, that you can kind of take to the Peterson fight too. First off, we can see how effective Errol Spence is when you're not feinting, you're not probing, and you're not controlling the space between them. And it's interesting because Peterson shows the capability of doing that in the Diaz fight, right? Let's not forget that Diaz is really short, so that might also play a part in it, why he feels confident in doing that. But those are skills that he does show, is his ability to do those kinds of things. But very inconsistent at doing them. But Errol Spence, very effective when he's not being controlled. Very effective when his opponent is not moving off the line, right? So like if Peterson were to come in and throw some body shots or whatever, or throw some headshots or whatever, and not move off the line after, Errol Spence is going to be able to counter him after and kind of mitigate the effectiveness of his opponent's offense, because not only do they know that counters are coming back at them, but because when you land one, he lands one, or he lands two, right? And then he also have to worry about mitigating his offense. So he's just going to be compiling points in that regard, because even when you're landing punches, he's landing punches too. So it'll be really interesting to see that. Things that are worrisome about the fight for Errol Spence is his propensity to go into his high guard. Now, we did see him make some adjustments, right, when he realized that the straight right hand was always coming, right, and he would kind of lean back away from it and take a step back and maybe counter. But early in the fight, when he goes into his high guard and then allows Kell Brook to throw body shots, and I think the body shots are where it's going to be paying dividends for Peterson, is his ability to maybe, throw some probing shots upstairs and get Errol Spence into a high guard, and then he can throw some left hooks to the body. He showed that he was very effective at doing that against Diaz, who's a very crafty fighter, who moves off the line very well, who's very difficult to pin down, and he was able to pin him down and land some body shots. So it'll be really interesting to see exactly how these two fighters kind of mesh up and come together. I think it's going to be a very fun and competitive fight. I do give the advantage to Errol Spence by not like a wide margin, right? But I would not bet on Peterson to win this fight, even if he was a 10-1 underdog or a 20-1 underdog. But I do think that it's going to be a fun and entertaining fight for sure. Maybe I should do a prediction video. I don't know. Chop up some video and talk about advantages and stuff. Maybe I'll do that later. Anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thanks, guys.